Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Milana Pakes. Thank you so much to Professor Michael Schumann for being my advisor and for introducing me. And I'm excited to go through my project with you all. So first I'll go over my 3-year life plan, um, and then I will go over my capstone background and the project deliverables from this capstone, and then what's to come for the future. So before Bard's program, I graduated from Northeastern University with an undergrad in environmental studies and international affairs in May 2019. My first job post-college was an energy efficiency consulting firm called DNVGL. They're now just known as DNV. And then I did that for about 3 years before pivoting and deciding that I really wanted to go to grad school. And I actually started in Bard's Center for Environmental Policy. In their Masters of Client Science and Policy program. And I was the Zoom tech for the MBA program, which is where I first learned that Bard's MBA program was not a traditional MBA and focused on mission-driven business and social entrepreneurship, which is something that I'd always had an interest in, and really wanted to combine it with renewable energy. And then I got a job at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Denver, Colorado, as part of my internship for my policy program. I'm actually still working there now. I was able to extend my internship, and actually, before January of this year, my plan was to hopefully work there full time. I'm doing my internship focuses on energy justice and energy equity work. I'm on the project development and finance team, and I was hoping to do that full time, but with the uncertainty of federal funding for renewable energy work, as well as all of the funding cuts and stop work orders, I now don't know if NREL is the right place for me for the next 4 years. Especially they are not going to be engaging in energy justice, equity projects. So if I want to continue that work, then perhaps doing it somewhere else would be best. NREL also laid off a bunch of people earlier this week due to the federal funding cuts. So my likelihood of getting a full-time job there is dwindling. So now my plan after I graduate is I don't know, basically. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. Hopefully, I can find a job that's still adjacent to energy equity and energy justice work, but we will see what the future holds. So my new 3-year life plan is to graduate. I can extend my internship at NREL actually up to a year after my graduation date, and then I can kind of use that as a buffer while I look for full-time jobs. Hopefully, in the next 2 to 3 years, I'll have a job that is in the renewable energy field, focusing on project development, finance, ownership models, and then hopefully as well one that especially works with renewable energy on tribal lands. So next I'll go over my capstone project. So I wanted to combine, because I'm a dual student, I had to do 2 capstones, and I wanted to combine this project into one as much as I could to make it easier on myself. Also because kind of my whole intention of doing the MBA program was to learn about kind of business operations and business implications for renewable energy, and how that intersects with policy considerations. So I really wanted to choose a project that focused on it was one topic that focused on kind of both sides of the coin, policy and the business side, and then one that also really combined the knowledge that I've gained from these 2 programs over the last 3 years. So that's how I ended on renewable energy on tribal lands. And I actually first got interested in this topic from the NYC Lab project in the MBA program, where I was paired with Tamara Stans and Looks Back Spotted Tail, who is a tribal member of the Sikonju Lakota people living on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. She's the founder and owner of Lakota Women Business, which was firstly a jewelry artisan business, and she's hoping to pivot it to sustainable housing using earthen block housing block, which is made out of soil, as well as pairing it with renewable energy to power the houses for her tribal community in South Dakota. And I particularly chose this topic because tribal communities experience a lot of systemic disparities when it comes to their resources. Tribal lands actually account for more than 75% of unelectrified homes in the US, and the households that do have electricity often face higher utility rates, older grid infrastructure, and more frequent power outages. Tribal nations experience a significantly higher energy burden than the national average. Energy burden is a measure used to assess a household's ability to afford their energy costs. And it's basically calculated by dividing a household's annual energy expenses by their annual income. The proportion that you get is kind of the percentage of your annual income that goes towards paying your electricity bills. And Native American households nationally have a median energy burden that is about 45% higher than their white counterparts. And the national average for energy burden is about 3%. So Native American communities have a really high energy burden, and a very large proportion of their incomes go towards paying electricity costs. Now, tribal lands have a really big potential for renewable energy development. There's a lot of natural resources that are really abundant on tribal lands that could be used for energy production. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory actually conducted a study that evaluated both the technical and economic potential of renewable technologies and found that there's about 6.5% or the potential on these lands for renewable energy is about 6.5% of the national total for renewable energy in all of the US, the highest being for solar PV and wind power. So this capstone really looked to address why renewable energy project development isn't happening on tribal lands, what are some of the barriers, and then what are some potential solutions to allow it to happen easier. And then also if renewable energy projects could not only supply clean, safe, and affordable energy for tribal communities, but also provide more long-term economic resilience as well. So because I had to do two capstones, my policy one is a traditional research thesis paper on this topic that really focuses on kind of the policy side of the barriers and solutions. And then the MBA focuses on more of the business barriers and solutions. And so my methods were for both projects were a literature review where I looked at what other authors in the space had to say about renewable energy development on tribal lands and why it was or wasn't happening. And then I also did a case study of wind energy projects on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, specifically some of the successes and challenges from these projects, how they may or may not be replicable for other tribal communities that are looking to do the same. And then lastly, I spoke with a lot of stakeholders in the space about tribal energy development, specifically clean energy development on tribal lands. So this is not fully representative of the interviews that I did. I was able to interview about 8 people in total, but I just wanted to highlight some of the key interviews that I did conduct. The first of which was with Tamara Stanson Looks Back, who I mentioned earlier. I was connected to with NYC Lab. She was a really great resource because she not only is a tribal member of the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, the Sikonju Lakota people, but also she has a background in clean energy project development on tribal lands in the American Southwest, specifically in New Mexico, as well as she's been involved with some of the wind projects that have been constructed on the Rosebud Reservation that I did for my case study. I also was able to speak to a lot of researchers from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, specifically the NREL Tribal Program Lead, as well as a lot of researchers that are involved in projects and work with NREL state, local, and tribal programs. So specifically researchers that are involved with technical assistance from federal programs designed to provide funding to tribes for energy planning, energy development, and renewable energy potential. And lastly, I spoke with Seven Skyline Consulting. They are a consulting firm of engineers that work with tribal communities that are hoping to do renewable energy development on their lands. I spoke with Jennifer Rauda, who's the founder and the principal, as well as David Harper, who's the executive officer and the tribal liaison. So, as I mentioned, I did a case study on wind energy projects on the Rosebud Reservation in South Central South Dakota. The Rosebud Reservation is the Rosebud Sioux tribe. Part of the larger Sioux Nation resides on this reservation in South Dakota. It's in the Great Plains, so it has a region with very significant wind energy potential, but also it's plagued by poverty, high unemployment, and limited infrastructure. And since the early 2000s, the tribe has pursued a strong commitment to renewable energy and pursued these wind energy projects. Specifically, these three: Alex Little Soldier single turbine project built in 2003, the Owl Feather War Bonnet project in 2007, and the North Antelopes Highland project in 2015. And these projects kind of each represented increasing ambition, both in scale and for community benefit, where each project aimed to be bigger, target more energy. And also, the last project was hoping to be a utility scale project that would provide over 100 gigawatts of energy for the reservation. However, these projects all faced persistent barriers. Actually, only two out of the three projects were, or only one out of the three projects was ever fully constructed and operational. That's the first one, the Alex Little Soldier single turbine project. The other two were never fully constructed, partially due to hurdles that I'm going to mention in the next slide. But the first project, although it was constructed and operational, it currently is not operational due to maintenance issues with the turbine and not having anybody on the reservation that knows how to fix it. And the challenges that these projects faced reflect broader systemic issues for tribal renewable energy development as a whole. So some of the hurdles and the barriers that I mentioned, specifically that were present in the Rosebud Sioux Wind Project case studies, as well as were present after speaking with some of my interviewees. There was a lot of delays from the Bureau of Indian Affairs for permitting and lease agreements. So long delays, actually, that the contract for the power purchase agreement for the Owl Feather War Bonnet project ran out before the Bureau of Indian Affairs was able to approve the permit for the land lease for this project. There's also a lack of tribal representation and energy governance. And in addition to that, there's limited access to capital. Tribal communities are non-tax entities, and they don't have to pay taxes. Because of that, they are ineligible to take advantage of renewable energy tax incentives. And so this prevents a big barrier to being able to financially support renewable energy technologies on their lands. And then there's also a lack of internal expertise within tribal communities, specifically to manage, maintain, or expand energy infrastructure. I mentioned this as well with the last project currently being unoperational because there is nobody on the reservation that knows how to fix the project as well as then maintain the turbine. And then lastly, because tribal lands are usually located on pretty rural areas that are away from most transmission lines, then there's inadequate transmission access and really high transmission costs to put in new energy projects, as well as tribal utility, or there's not a lot of tribally owned utilities. So usually the utilities that serve tribal communities don't have any tribal representation and usually oppose these projects. So I wanted to just go over some of my policy recommendations from my policy capstone side of this. The first is to align the timelines and expectations for lease approvals for renewable energy projects with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Will hopefully address the problem of having a really long lease approval timeline, and will hopefully make it so that those projects can get approved by the Bureau of Indian Affairs in a more timely manner, and they don't run out the clock with the contracts. And then next, the Inflation Reduction Act has a provision called direct pay that actually allows tribes to be able to take advantage of renewable energy tax credits. Instead of just getting a credit off of their taxes for the technology, they're able to take a direct payment instead of that credit. And this is not permanent, however, and due to the current uncertainty with a lot of federal funding and programs, I think that it should be made permanent so that tribes know that they can utilize this for decades to come for their projects. Next, a lot of tribes will partner with third-party organizations to build these projects because it gives them financial capital, as well as the third-party organizations can have equity ownership in the project that the tribe can't have due to their non-tax status. I think there should be requirements that if a third-party organization is going to work with tribes on these projects, they need to provide more reciprocal benefits other than just profit sharing. So that includes training, dedicated staff, and technical expertise in the communities that they're going to be working with. And then lastly, for tribes that are looking to create their own tribally owned utility, I think there should be a standard operating procedure for the tribes that want to do this. It's really complicated, and there's a lot of barriers due to their unique legal and tax status because of their sovereignty. And because of that, I think it'd be really useful to have a standard operating procedure for tribes that want to do this. Almost could serve as like a roadmap for the future to just make that process a lot easier. So the MBA deliverable of this capstone is my website, which is a tribal clean energy resource guide. This website is basically designed to be kind of a culmination of all of the information that I found while I was researching. As well, it was designed to just be really digestible and publicly available, specifically for tribal communities that don't may not have any information on this topic, may not know where to start, may not know kind of what their different options are for either the renewable energy technology or the ownership. So this website is really just kind of a resource guide that compiles all of that information. And I will go over that in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to touch on some of the goals for this website. I mentioned a couple of them already. A couple that I didn't mention. This website is tailored specifically for U.S. tribal communities. I didn't touch at all on international indigenous communities and renewable energy ownership options for that, but that would be another cool place to go with this. I also do want this to be a living resource that can be updated and maintained regularly with the most accurate, up-to-date information, especially in recent times with federal programs and federal funding being so uncertain and kind of new things happening every day. I think it's going to be really important to have a resource that kind of is accurate. And I do have plans to maintain this after graduation. So what's next specifically for the website? I mentioned that I have plans to maintain it after graduation, but it would be really great to have a partnership or a sponsorship from an organization that would be interested in hosting and maintaining this site full time. I actually interviewed Seven Skyline, as I mentioned before, and the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy, both of which are consultants that work with tribal communities to develop renewable energy for their communities and on tribal lands. I think these two organizations could be really good options in terms of partners that would maybe want to host or maintain the site that could use it both while they work with tribal communities as well as provide it as a source of information for them. I also would have loved to work with an Indigenous web developer or designer to help build out the site. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one, which is why I ended up using a Google site because it was easy to set up and it was free. But if I could find an Indigenous web developer and designer to work with and collaborate with to build this into a proper site, I would really love to do that as well. And then lastly, as I mentioned, because of the uncertainty with federal funding and with federal support, tribes are really reliant on federal support and federal programs. It's written into the Constitution that the federal government has to provide support for tribes, specifically for their energy development as well as for other things. But due to the uncertainty of the administration right now and the political landscape, I think it's really important to have a guide that kind of has options for tribes to do renewable energy development that they don't need to rely on federal funding, on federal sources. I do include a lot of federal information and government information on this website because there is so many great resources available from all of the work that was done in the last administration. But ideally, this would be a website that tribal communities could go to seek out what the process and resources are for renewable energy development that doesn't rely on federal funding or federal support. So I have a QR code to my website on this slide. I'm going to go over it in the next couple minutes, but feel free to email me with any feedback you have, any information that you think should be updated or is missing that should be included on the site. And next, I will go over it. So this is the website. It's a one-page site and it has kind of these 6 categories of information for tribal communities developing renewable energy projects. So specifically, it has a step-by-step guide. This could definitely be expanded upon. It's pretty simple for now. Mostly, I wanted it to be a place for tribal communities that don't even know where to start, don't even know what this process entails to kind of take a look at this and know what they're getting into. But certainly, I would love to build this out more, make it more in depth, possibly have a separate page linking from each step that goes into more information, as well as possibly provides resources, standard operating procedures, something like that. The next section goes over the ownership models that tribes could choose to engage in for renewable energy project development. Once again, I think this could also be built upon a lot. There's definitely more than these three, but these are the three main ownership models that I found in my research. I do link to this article that goes over other kind of creative capital stack options and unique ownership models that don't necessarily fall under one of these three traditional types. I also go over a lot of different laws for tribal project development because there's a lot of legal implications and considerations that are only subject to tribal communities. I kind of go over those in detail here. This is kind of the biggest section, but it is pretty broad where it really just has a one sentence summary for each law. But I would also love to go more in depth here. Next, I have a section that goes over the different renewable energy technology options for tribes, including some more sources on kind of where they can go to learn more information, but I really just provide a basic kind of 2-3 sentence overview about what the technology type is and how it works. Then I have a bunch of case studies of successful tribal energy projects that tribes can go to kind of, if this project is in their area or if it's a project type that they would like to replicate. There's a range of different projects here: microgrid, community solar, rooftop solar, utility scale, commercial wind, and then also a solar farm owned by a tribal utility authority. So there's a different range of projects that were really successful that I think all kind of touch on a different project type, whether it's technology type or the way that it benefits their community. And then lastly, I have a list of organizations that do work in this area. They're either tribally owned and operated organizations or organizations that work really closely with tribal communities and are kind of vetted by other tribal community members. So ideally, they have the tribe's best interest at mind, want to work with tribes, not work against them, don't want to exploit them. But there's different categories: consulting, engineering, developers, finance, whether that's providing lending, funds, grants. A lot of these are CDFIs. There's a bunch of nonprofit groups as well. I do have some government related resources on here as well, specifically US DOE's Office of Indian Energy, NREL's state, local, and tribal team, and then the US Department of Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs. And then lastly, I have some resources and tools here. NREL has a lot of really great tools for putting in energy information and then giving you kind of a technical output. And then as well, the University of New Hampshire has a lot of really great tools for both community finance development as well as renewable energy project development. And lastly, the Office of Indian Energy has a really great education and capacity building resources page. Hopefully it will not be taken down. They have a lot of online courses for developing and financing renewable energy projects on tribal lands, as well as a resource library and links to past workshops and webinars that they've held. So once again, my contact information is below. If you have any questions about this or want to learn more, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much.